Hi, Irene. Good to see you again on the last day of Davos. This is the third and last installment of our discussions about what's been going on in Davos and how it relates to Dataswyft. I gather there's been a lot of debate, not just in Davos, but in the press more largely about the rise of big tech firms and AI. And AI, of course, needs data of different kinds and different market contexts to actually operate. I was wondering whether that came up in any of the debates that you went to yesterday and how that fits with the broader debates going on outside the sessions in Davos about the political trends we're seeing emerge from the US.
Yeah, I think the discussions around AI is, you would expect discussions like this around any new form of technology. Many people, I'm an ardent fan of a history of technology. When television first came on, when the internet first came on, the patterns to which we as human beings react to these technologies is actually quite similar. We will take what is the old and we'll try to take a linear extension of the old. Like in television, when it came about, everybody didn't know what to do with all these images and video. They just sat around holding pieces of paper as though it was just a radio telecast with moving images, right? And similar with the internet. When it first came on, all it was just a lot of electronic brochures, and you see the same. AI came in. Oh my God, this is amazing. This is wonderful. It's some kind of intelligence. I'm using it, you're using it. But what value is it? How does it fit into our lives? How does it fit into the markets? Who is getting value from it? And where is the money? I think that's the general one theme on AI. The second theme on AI that I tend to see what's happening and talked about in Davos is, of course, data, the provenance of data. And that comes down not just in terms of whose data it is and do we have the rights to use those data, but it is around attribution. It's like saying, for the longest time, you've been using my data to give me services like Facebook or like TikTok and like Spotify. Do you then have the right to use the same data to create intelligence and more value out of your company and business using the original source data from the service you rented to us? So I think there's a sense of fairness and attribution of the value that a company would get from using AI and how that is attributed back to the source of the data that has contributed towards that model. So that's there is that part of it too.
So if you're talking about how to about the attribution of data, you're implying that there is a function there going on today, maybe more, not necessarily in a perfect market, of providing value back to the source of that data. But what I've been hearing increasingly in debates about AI is that, we're very quickly getting into a situation where models that are really dependent on more and more specific data, more contextual data that can actually be trusted. And, the question seems is when we project ourselves further into the future of this evolution, where do you see the value being captured from having access to data? Is it with these few large platforms that we heard investment announcements around just yesterday, or is some of that value going to gradually be recouped by end users and contributors, and what will influence that outcome in your opinion?
I think at the beginning, any platform that is digital, fully digital, and is a tech platform will of course be the first mover to use AI, obviously, because it's all encompassing. It's not a challenging thing to integrate LLM models and all sorts of models, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. It's a natural thing. But the current revolution of AI that we see has obviously a more far-reaching impact than just digital platforms and tech platforms. They impact on human skills, human capabilities. And this is why people get a little bit agitated because they think, oh, it's going to replace jobs, isn't it? And they forget that often things that may replace jobs, like your iPhone, like your laptop, create more jobs and bigger markets. Any form of technology that is amplification may start a little bit with a slight contraction as the existing incumbents internalize these efficiencies into their system. But then because of its distribution to wider skills and labor and people, someone said that to me, oh, the AI that basically help you buy groceries, now no more cashier. At the cashier, you can just check out yourself. I say, yes, but then people didn't realize that you were stealing food. And so they have to hire another guy to check on you. And so what I'm saying is technology is rarely perfect, and it creates different kinds of jobs, and it generally amplifies the size of the market rather than shrink it.
So we have these waves of what people often refer to as creative destruction, which actually then sets the platform up, and I'm using the word in a broader sense, for new services to evolve, just like you said, in the way that apps have kind of now created lots of new jobs and functionalities on smartphones that we hadn't even thought about previously. But that also then leads me to another question and an issue that came up over the last 3 days about the role of market concentration around big tech firms, around what people in the political sphere have been referring to as oligarchy sort of structures, or market concentration around maybe not monopolies at this stage, but groups of companies that certainly have a lot of power. I'm wondering, while we talk about the role of data being so critical, there is a sense that as we maybe move towards a much more multipolar world, I've heard echoes this week of people saying, well, what's happening in the US is actually going to reinforce the trend of different platforms becoming, realizing a need to integrate and connect across different sources of information, different kinds of, sectors, different countries. And that seems to present a challenge to the incumbent firms, even though they may be quite concentrated today, in terms of how they will navigate that increasing actual participation and much more diverse field of people that are moving into the digital world. How do you see the dynamics there playing out, and what role does then data exchange play in that next evolution?
So let's just take it in two parts. Please remind me on the data part. Let me take the first one, the so-called oligarchy world. So history gives us a very good understanding of markets and trade networks, right? And we're always talking about the game in town is the way markets are being coordinated, right? Mm-hmm. You've got some stuff, you need to come to some place to trade, you want to exchange something. All markets are like that. Mm-hmm. And there is always a role of a coordinator of the market. If you're in a food court, there's the owner of the food court, just have to make sure that it runs. It has to, if you're a market, there is always a central coordinator that someone has to coordinate it. A fully distributed market just cannot function without at least some form of, no matter how thin, coordination of the market. So the question is, who becomes a better coordinator of the market? Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the Bronze Age, which is a favorite historical age of mine, and spend a lot of time in that space, city-states were very much the coordinator of markets, and these city-states have got kings, and kings talk to kings, and they will impose the taxes and things like that. Until they're not a very good coordinator of the market, people get pissed off and they realize they want to form companies, and then the company tries to coordinate a market, and you end up with the East India Company. the largest monopoly in trade network for a time, right? So I think, and then finally it breaks up into small little merchant ships, and again, small businesses start again. Today, 99% of all businesses in the world is micro and small businesses, and they are also looking for some kind of coordinator for coordinating thoughts. So if you look at the move between city-states, oligarchies, small businesses trying to do some kind of decentralized coordination among their own, the market is always trying to find the best way of coordinating. That everybody is always pissed off. Okay, let's just be clear. All right, there's always something you're unhappy about in the way it is coordinated. So I believe that it is a natural occurrence to try that it all constantly oscillates between the state trying to coordinate something and then becoming too clunky working with other city-states and too slow or too something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it springs out that, oh, look, this bunch of companies seems to be getting it right. So let's just make them manage it then, and then they become too big and they become horrible again. And you know what, we can do better on our own. We will make a little grouping here. And I think it is almost an evolutionary aspect of the way markets are coordinated.
So this brings us back then, I think, to this issue of coordination and what's the best structure for market coordination in each era. Brings us back to a couple of the terms that you introduced yesterday. You're implying that it's about bringing people that want to buy things and sell things together. Sometimes we refer to these companies, I think, as merchants. You used the term merchants, I think, when you were referring to part of the data ecosystem that Dataswyft has created. And secondly, we often in markets see a certain degree of standardization of products, whether it be in commodities at one extreme or by having barcodes on products so that we can more easily scan them at the checkout, let's say, and track them through logistics chains. There, I think you brought up the term yesterday of badges, which I'm guessing have something to do with how we formalize data packages, perhaps. Those are two of the elements that you're talking about actually coordinating in the future. Maybe you could explain what those two things are and how they relate to what you just said about market structures and their evolution.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that brings me to the point of the data. So data has two components to it in our world, in our world of market design and data set. The component of data that is our behavior, which we believe fundamentally should be free. Our behavior should be free, and therefore markets for data should be free. And the other component is information about us of which we wish to be able to impart or share in a way that is safe, in which that makes it efficient. Telling you my size or my weight or something about my health so that you can get treatment are typical this kind of transfer of information. Telling you that I am in the lower socioeconomic status of the country and therefore should get my subsidy now, please. It's another one way. Then the other part, which is a whole big lumpy set of all my behaviors. Now, in Dataswyft, we call the all lumpy set of all our behaviors that maybe you could have acquired from your bank or whatever as what we call supply side. These are generated for their own purposes. And you could own some of them because if the companies give it back to you, and you want to use it, yes, you could own that. But that's messy, right? When I tell you that, oh, I'd like your medical records, you go, oh my God, no, you're not getting my medical records. If I tell you, I'd like your height, please. Oh, sure. Some of us within seconds, right? And so the word height and the word medical records suggest to you a construct to which how markets form around data. The exchange part of the market, not the supply, insight, behavioral part. That's a different market, right? There are two parts. So the exchange part needs to make clear, if you say, you want my height, what is it for? That, I think, GDPR has talked about legitimate purpose, it's talked about how it's bundled, the standard, there's a word called height that is in centimeters or in feet. That's those kind of packages. Human understanding of that is required for a market to form because otherwise it's not safe. I don't know. You might infer medical records to mean something else. I infer something else. So that makes it safe to transact. It makes it not congested. You know what you're getting. You know where the supply is coming from. And there are enough people asking for my for my height to create the word height and a badge in our world. That's why a badge exists. So merchant is our generic word for anybody who wants to validate that information, that it is true, is that information is true about you, or wishes to acquire the information from you.
So to validate or to take the information, to receive the information, you're saying?
And all. So you could, yeah, and all.
Because we often hear the term merchant used in the context of, among others, payment markets, which are famously referred to as two-sided or multi-sided markets. Payment cards are known for having quite a complex structure of coordination. Does that structure, if you use these very, very brief analogies of how trade took place in the Middle Ages through city-states and then through companies and the East India Company trading type model, etc., reflecting on where we are now in the evolution of platform economics and what we've learned from card networks, for example, do you see any of these structures being similar as we move forward into a data-driven economy, or do you think we'll be experimenting with new structures that we haven't yet seen before?
Oh, I think the world has tested almost every possible structure there is. It's a question about which structure works for what asset, right? And so your analogy or your example of payment is exactly the point. Payment, even though it seems simple right now, I'm pushing $1 or $2 to you, evolved over 800 years, and the evolution of the asset was in terms of currency, in terms of the way it was packaged, in terms of how it was instructed, whether you use a check or who pays what. All of that was very much driven by what technology was available at that time, right? And you could say, in a way, payment was the first form of power, choice, and control decentralization, because now becomes our asset of which we have a choice and control over who we pay. I think data markets will, on the exchange and information sharing bit, would we like to think follow the same manner, because it's still an asset. It may be your BMI, it may be your height. You still want to know who you're giving it to. You can still be scammed. Hate to say this, it comes with the pluses and the minuses. It still needs the guardrails. It still needs the form to be standardized. You see $3, you would see a certain standardized mode. So we think that structure of the market is pretty established, can be established in a similar way. But the market couldn't happen if there is no asset to move. And so, when we started the HAT and Dataswyft many years ago, there were no such assets to move. The national IDs weren't thought of as a digital form yet. They were, clunky old pieces of information. It was, when you don't have a well-formed piece of asset to move, you suffer from congestion.
So that leads me to maybe one last question, which is, has also implicitly come up in the discussions over the last few days in the world of competition between different legal systems and political systems. There has been a long debate, as you know, about how to conceive of property rights, data rights, economic rights around data. And I'm specifically using the word around because, as I think we all know, data is not like other commodities which are exhausted. It's a good which can actually be shared many times. And the rights over data versus to use or access data versus the economic rights are difficult to define, it seems, in a way that matches this problem you're describing. Where do you see this debate about data rights in those different contexts of data protection, legal rights, access rights, economic rights? Where do you think that debate should be going in order to propel the opportunities in the digital economy?
So let me again separate the two sides of the market.
Yep.
The supply side. I think on the supply side, fundamentally, it is good for all economies in the world if data is democratized. That means whatever data that was generated of you, whether it was on Google, Facebook, whatever it is, you must have the right to acquire it, access it, use it. That is your right, and it's fundamental. Um, how you choose to acquire it, and there are intermediaries who say we give you access and control and how it's going to be used with permission, or Dataswyft way, which basically means you acquire it and you own the intellectual property rights to it and therefore can license it on if you wish, to the head microserver. That's our model. Everybody has a different model. But fundamentally, we believe that on the supply side, data should be democratized for the good of everyone. Okay, that's number one. Now, how it's going to be used now creates a model on the market that is demand side. Now, on the demand side of the model, there are several markets. There is the enrichment market, which is, well, you know, you have all this bunch of data. We could be enriched to tell you more things about yourself and your insights and things like that. Well, that's one market. It's situated, you know, the situation of the market is different. You could probably sit the source, you know, on your phone. It's a market in itself, right? And it derives insights, and you can get value from that insight. And then you have the information sharing market, which is a Dataswyft market, and our merchant network, which is a distribution channel to which supply side very carefully, securely, with the right kind of guardrails and control, creates little badges that has a value of which it can become a distribution channel through the data wallet to be used by the whole country, the whole world, or whatever it is. And you just need one or two or something like that, and it creates a market. That is Dataswift's model. So demand side, it is clear there are several types of markets. Supply side is also clear. We should have access and we should have data democratized. I don't see there to be any debate among both governments and intermediary that this should happen. I think everybody concur this should happen. Where there is a question is the structure of the market to unlock that value on the demand side. This is where most debates are. And some would say, well, there's not just the supply side insight and also not just the information sharing, but there's also the LLM models and the machine learning that we could use it. Then you get into a bit of a messy stage of attribution. And whoever wants to play in that space, you just have to deal with that messy attribution and find the attribution model. It's not up to me. There are intermediaries are trying to solve that problem of attribution, and if they do, good luck to them. We have a simple attribution model for that. We run a more Spotify licensing type of model. Whenever a piece of data gets into a badge and the badge is used, it basically remunerates the original supplier and the contributor to the badge. But that's our model. It could be, it could be any model.
So if we want to reconcile this future world of tangible, democratized data and the attribution of it in an economic as well as legal sense with the very practical issues we face today about cross-border trade, taxation, protections, so much of this is happening in what we might call the virtual space. How are these things going to be reconciled if governments today are constantly having now debates about who has the right to tax, where is revenue created, where is value added created? Is this going to be solved by data democratization, or is this actually going to create more problems initially for us?
Well, on the data democratization side, it's like, data is behavior, right? So if you own your own data, you can bring it anywhere you want. No government in the world can stop you. At what point you engage with the platform to do something with it, well, that depends. It's like you are in the open sea, you can go anywhere you want, but then once you call into port, the port may tax you because the port is giving you benefits, right? And you don't want to call it that port, then don't call it that port, right? And if that port gives you so much trade benefits because there's a whole market going on at that port, then you go to that port, right? So in a way, I think you've got to separate the rights of individuals to carry their data and share it peer-to-peer, like the way we do everywhere in the world, from the way governments want to intervene in that market for the purpose of taxation.
And last point, then you raised that you're alluding to and making the analogy with physical persons, but there's a whole world out there of legal persons that can be disassociated from the location of natural persons. We have very simply Cayman Island funds, or we have large corporations based in Australia. Where does that fit into your future architecture? And if you were to sit down with the tax authorities, they're going to be reopening the negotiations in the next few days about digital taxation. Where are we going?
Oh gosh, we can have an entire session on tax policy. I mean, I can talk for hours on tax policy and how I feel about this. But I would say fundamentally, if we're going into tax policy, we need to come back to the roots of the objective. Are you doing it because you are basically trying to do a BEPS-like defensive maneuver? You don't want an erosion of where the value is, and you just want to make sure that tax is taxed as where the value is created? Or are you just trying to drive more revenues to the country? I mean, come on, let's just be fair, okay? And so it comes down to, are you trying to, is it a defensive move, or is it a progressive, I want to provide better infrastructure and therefore there should be taxation around it? What kind of move? What is the objective here?
Okay, so great. Well, I think we're running out of time, but that whole topic of competitive trade economics in a world of digital goods is maybe something we'll have to pick up on another time. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Have a good flight, and hope you enjoyed Davos.
All right, thanks. Bye.